Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you after horrific events disrupted the quiet and unhurried lives of the residents of the tiny town of Meimei in the southern Philippines. Lavella McGod finally received permission from law enforcement to clean her own home, which had been the scene of a terrible crime. As she wiped down the surfaces, she reflected on the fact that not long ago, these rooms were filled with prosperity, stability, laughter and warmth, and then someone ruthless had cruelly and inhumanly taken the lives of her two children, after which the shadow of tragedy had consumed all familiar life. It wasn't easy for LVLL to touch the pieces of furniture that still held the memories of her children, but cleaning distracted her from the heavy emotions, creating a temporary sense of control, at least over the order of the house. And she found in this control a temporary refuge from the emotional pain, because she also has an adopted daughter, Janice, who miraculously managed to survive the terrible massacre, and for whom she must remain strong in recent days. The grieving mother could only cry, scream, curl up in a ball, and for long, long hours went deep into herself. Although she realized how hard it must be for Janice, who was the only witness to the crime. Reaching her foster daughter's room, Lola concentrated especially on cleaning. Suddenly she found an ID card that definitely shouldn't have been in the girl's room. The ID belonged to a 17-year-old boy named Merlin. LVLL immediately went to the police station to report the find. The ID probably belongs to one of the 3 burglars that Janice had previously reported. She said the police officers listened carefully to the woman, and the ID did indeed go a long way toward bringing the crime closer to being solved. However, they were not at all surprised, as by this point, they were pretty sure who, how and why killed Gwen and Louis McGod Good on December 10, 2021, on September 22, 2013, long before the events at the MD's home. A 9-year-old girl, unable to bear the lack of parental love, care, poverty, beatings and physical hunger, stood on the dock and stared hopelessly into the water. A lonely, quiet child caught the attention of a woman passing by when asked what she was doing here alone, and if she needed help. The girl looked up and quietly replied, "My name is Janice Sabile. I have no parents, and for some reason I don't remember anything." The woman decided that the child had suffered some kind of shock that caused her memory loss. Perhaps something terrible had happened to her. The woman took the girl to the nearest police station, where she was assured that the child would be taken care of. Janice was placed in temporary custody, and they tried to find her parents. Time passed, the search yielded nothing. The girl did not remember anything about her life. No one ever reported the child missing, and after a while the girl was officially recognized as an orphan, transferred to the permanent care of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, which in general did not sadden the child at all. For the first time she had plenty of food, clothes, and a lot of friendly attention from adults. As it turned out, Janice did not lose her memory, but the defense mechanisms of the child's consciousness, having experienced so many traumatic events, pushed away the memories of family and home. Being an orphan meant staying in a new and better life. That's what she did. Even then, Janice had her first, not yet fully realized experience of how to behave so that others would want to help you. Unfortunately, the events of 2013 were not a one-time ticket to a new life, but a mechanism for getting what she wanted. Cruz and Lavella McGod were known to others as a well-meaning married couple. Cruz worked as a teacher at the local high school, while his wife ran an elementary school. The couple raised 2 wonderful children, incredibly intelligent. 18-year-old beauty Gwen participated in all extracurricular activities and was a member of the Girl Scouts. The girl dreamed of a career as a doctor, and even wanting to test herself, enrolled in her last year of high school in a preparatory medical school. 16-year-old Louis became the soul of any company in which he came. He easily made friends, was open, played guitar, sang, and painted at all. This young man showed extreme responsibility, liked to help everyone, and planned to achieve success. In-law parents were proud of their children, helped them in everything, and supported their plans and desires. The family led a measured life, attended church, and did charity work at one of the charity events in the church. Gwen and met Janice, where she came as a nanny to look after the children. The girls became instant friends and became best friends. Overnight, almost the same age. They were fun and funky. They often posted dance videos on TikTok and came up with interesting ways to spend their time. Louis enjoyed participating in their activities. It didn't take long for all three of them to become best friends. At one point, her brother and sister wondered why Janice was working instead of attending school. And Janice told them that she was an orphan. Her parents died of illness when she was very young, so she has had to rely solely on government assistance since she was a child. In order to be able to buy something for herself, she has to work part-time instead of studying. The girl complained that the couple who gave her a job pays very, very little, and the money received is enough only for food, and she has to work almost around the clock later. Janice repeatedly shared her fears about the future with her new friends, since she is about to turn 18. She is about to lose some social benefits intended only for minors, and perhaps she will not even have anything to pay for housing, education, and a good career. Are all but forgotten, kind-hearted. Gwen, heartened by her friend's plight, decided to lend her a helping hand and went to her parents. She told them about the difficult, tragic life of a new acquaintance and asked them to adopt Janice so that she had a roof over her head and conditions for studying. She assured the parents that everyone would benefit. Janice would be able to get an education, help share the housework, and help Louis with his homework. The McGods were skeptical at first. They worked as teachers. Their income was low. They could hardly afford another child. And besides, there was no extra room in their house for Janice. Louis even volunteered to sleep on the living room couch and gave up his room. The parents couldn't stand their daughter and son's repeated requests and agreed in July 2021. The MDS officially adopted Janice. They enrolled her in school, and she even took their last name. Janice turned out to be a smart and very polite girl. She accepted all the rules in the house. Cruz and Lavella wanted their children to grow up to be responsible and disciplined people who would know the value of work and money, and so they introduced them to the household. Janice was given exactly the same amount of housework as her sister and brother. The girl gladly performed her share of the duties and always showed respect for her foster parents to show her gratitude to the family. She would sometimes get up early and cook breakfast for everyone. The couple realized that they had not just helped the girl, as Gwen had asked them to do, but had indeed unexpectedly gained a second daughter, albeit a very old one. At one point, Janice even called them Mum and Dad on December 10th, 2021, at 2:58 in the afternoon. Cruz, who was checking his middle school homework, received a phone call from a neighbor who hurriedly told him, "Go home soon, but don't panic." Before time. Janice left a strange post on Facebook. "Your house appears to have been burglarized." Cruz immediately put work on hold, called his wife, who was also at work at that moment, and rushed home on the way. He tried to call his children, but they didn't answer. The worried father drove home at top speed, more worried about the safety of his children than the money in the house. At about 3:15 in the afternoon, Cruz pulled up to the house. The door to the house appeared to be locked, so he went to the back door, walked around the house and entered through a second entrance. Everywhere was a mess. Cruz went from room to room and called the kids by name. When he reached the living room, he saw something no parent should ever see. Luis and Gwen were lying on the floor covered in blood. Luis lay in the living room with his hands tied behind his back, a towel stuffed in his mouth and scars all over his body. He found his eldest daughter Gwen not far from the bedroom door, her entire body covered in cuts and blood. They were most definitely dead, with a noise in his head, on absorbent cotton legs. Cruz suddenly realized that there had to be a third person in the house. He started screaming as hard as he could, "Janice. Janice." At one point, Cruz heard a quiet voice say, "Daddy," turning around. Cruz was relieved to see that Janice was alive, hugged her, and noticed that her hair was wet. He asked why it was wet, and the girl replied that she had just gotten out of the shower, and therefore, because of the water, did not hear his call. Of course, her grief-stricken father thought her answer was strange, but he decided that Janice wanted to wash away the horror she had experienced. After all, many people in shocking situations begin to behave strangely after making sure she was unharmed. The man called the police. Police arriving on the scene found a hammer, a baseball bat, a knife, and a broken wine bottle near the victims under normal circumstances. Having more than one means of committing a crime means there is more than one perpetrator. The police turned all of these items over to the
appropriate officers, hoping to find fingerprints on them, and proceeded to search the house and collect evidence near and around it. They also advised Cruz and Lel to carefully examine the items to see what was missing very carefully. The officers conducted a detailed interview with Janice, the only survivor. She told them that she and Gwen were in the room and Louis was in the living room. When they heard screaming and the sounds of a fight, she and Gwen immediately went to check what had happened and saw two masked robbers hitting Louise with a hammer and a baseball bat, and a third man with a knife, terrified at what they saw. They gave themselves away with a muffled shriek. One of the thugs chased after Gwen. According to Janice, he didn't notice her. She took advantage of the moment, ran into the small bedroom, locked the door, and hid under the bed. There she lay in shock, not daring to move. When she came to her senses, she sent a text message asking for help to her mother, Lavella, but her mother did not answer. She was afraid to call the police to avoid giving herself away by ringing or the sound of her voice. So 12 minutes after texting her mom, she wrote 2 messages for help on her Facebook page. "Help, there are strangers in my house. I can only hide in my room right now. I don't want to die." One of those messages was seen by a neighbor who called Cruz 3 days after the terrible event, which struck all residents of the town. With its unbearable cruelty, the Philippine police created a special investigative team including the best staff and specialists. On December 15th, the investigation team said that a large amount of evidence and clues have been collected, and the nature of the case is temporarily classified as robbery and murder, but they do not rule out other versions and will conduct an in-depth investigation by other theories. The investigation team members meant their growing belief that Janice was the key figure in the crime. Specialists compared evidence from the crime scene and witness statements with Janice's and found several very large discrepancies that allowed them to list the girl as a suspect rather than a witness. First, nothing was missing from the house, which seemed illogical if the 3 bandits were planning a robbery. Cruz and LA said that all the valuables and money were in place, despite the fact that the house was turned upside down. Only Gwen's cell phone was missing. Second, the investigation team found a plastic bag containing bloody pants and shirt in a creek near Cruz's home. It was confirmed that the bloodstains on the clothes belonged to the murdered men. It appeared that the perpetrator or one of the perpetrators changed into clean clothes after the murder and then fled. That is, he was unusually calm after committing the crime, indicating premeditation and planning in a robbery that went wrong and ended in multiple murders. The perpetrator would likely have panicked and tried to get away as quickly as possible rather than waste time searching for clean clothes and changing clothes, especially since the parents of the murdered men did not confirm that any articles of clothing were missing, and it is highly unlikely that the perpetrator would have thrown the bloody clothes into the stream behind the house. Moreover, there were signs at the scene that indicated an emotional crime, not a cold-blooded one. There were too many wounds and fractures found on the bodies of the brother and sister. Gwen even had one ear torn off. Most of the injuries were to her face. The autopsy took 2 full old days. Such a scene seems more like anger, venting for revenge or jealousy, rather than calculation. The perpetrator was clearly very angry. The nature of the crime clearly indicated a personal grudge killing third. According to the forensic medical report, the older sister died before the younger brother, which contradicted Janice's testimony, because according to her, the younger brother was attacked first, and with as many wounds as Janice described, it was unlikely that he could have outlived his sister, who had been bleeding for quite some time. Fourthly, the murder weapons were the property of the family. The perpetrators did not bring them with them. The hammer belonged to the head of the family, and he kept it in the laundry room drawer. Cruz was sure that only his eldest daughters, Gwen and Janice, knew where the hammer was. Kept a baseball bat found at the scene, according to the parents' testimony, belonged to their youngest son, who kept it on the second tier of the bed under a blanket. Burglars, who are suddenly caught in the act, don't run around the house looking for a hammer and bat stored in non-obvious places. They either bring their own murder weapons or use available items. It turns out the location of the 2 key tools of this crime were known only to the people living in the house. Cruz and LVLL had alias that leaves. Janice, who knew where the hammer and baseball bat were kept. Louis gave her his room, so she was aware of the strange location of the item. So even if she wasn't the killer, she was probably an accomplice, since the perpetrator wasn't alone. Fifth, when Ella received a text message from Janice asking for help, she immediately called back. But Janice did not answer and later said that after not receiving a response from her mother, She published a Facebook post. Dispatch data confirmed levels call the Facebook post quite long, and with emoticons somehow did not fit with the behavior of a person afraid to even move. Sixth, shock and panic could not explain. Taking a shower instead of calling the police. A person is usually most vulnerable in the shower. Plus, the water muffles the sounds of approaching footsteps. So why did Janice shower and wash her hair while she claimed she was afraid of the 3 unknown men? Since they might not have left if Janice had no doubt that the burglars were already gone and wasn't afraid to give herself away by making noises, then why didn't she call the police before taking a shower? Well, and most importantly, the autopsy revealed that Gwen and Lewis passed away around 2 p.m., which meant Janice waited about 48 minutes to start texting her foster mom and waited an hour to post on Facebook. The room she hid in was ransacked. It seemed the perpetrators had scrutinized every corner of the small room but hadn't noticed Janice. How could that be? By the time LVLL entered the police station with Merlin's ID, the investigation team had already received the lab report. Janice's fingerprints had been found on the hammer and baseball bat, used as the murder weapons. Of course, the implements could have had the prints of the people living in the house, but given the other inconsistencies, she was the prime suspect. Janice was brought to the station for formal questioning on December 18th. She was told about the ID she had found, the results of the forensic examination, and all the inconsistencies. Unexpectedly for the detectives, Janice immediately confessed to the crime. She revealed that she and Merlin had killed Gwen and Lewis shortly after the confession. Janice and Merlin were arrested. Gwen's cell phone, the only missing item from the crime scene, was found in the young man's belongings. Both young men were charged with first-degree murder and sent to juvenile detention without bail. It is still unknown how Janice and Merlin met and what their relationship was. It is only known that Merlin was the same age as the girl and worked in the church, preparing everything necessary for church services. The young people were friends on Facebook. Having studied their correspondence, investigators learned that they planned to kill Gwen and Louise since December 1st. That is 10 days before the tragedy. Cruz and Lala were distraught and could hardly believe what was happening. Janice had always seemed so quiet and well-mannered. They kindly took her in and treated her like their own daughter and their children, loved the girl like a sister. Why did she do such a thing? Why Janice attributed it to envy of Gwen, a well-to-do family loving parents. She resented why she never got what Gwen got effortlessly, in her opinion. The adoption was nothing more than cheap sympathy and a way for family members to validate themselves at the expense of her difficult life. I felt like a stray dog that had been picked up. If the MDS had known how Janice really felt, they would have tried to help her understand, but they didn't. Janice skillfully hid everything behind Nennis, and she didn't make breakfast out of gratitude, but felt obliged to do so. Janice was very angry about all the housework the MDS made her do, believing them to be hypocrites and treating her like a servant rather than a daughter. As soon as the news of Janice's confession became known, there was an uproar in the town. All the residents could not believe that a 17-year-old orphan girl had committed such a brutal crime. People began to compare her to the heroine of the movie Orphan, because of which the number of adoptions had already dropped once. As the uproar continued to grow, the investigative team looked into Janice's past and found her mother and 2 younger brothers. Turns out, Janice wasn't an orphan when she was very young. Her family lived in great poverty. Her father gambled and spent all the family money on gambling. The family was almost constantly starving. In 2013, the girl ran away from home standing on that pier. She accepted the help of a concerned woman out of desperation. Having received food care and warmth almost for the first time in her life, she realized that the best solution would be never to remember her parents and brothers again. Her family wasn't looking for her. The lack of an extra mouth only made their lives easier, and there was no money for searching. Perhaps her mother secretly hoped that her daughter was in better circumstances. Since then, Janice realized that pretending to be an orphan is profitable, so you can get sympathy, food, and clothes instead of hunger and beatings. And she can hardly be blamed for that conclusion. Since discovering the truth about the difficult childhood, the motive has become clearer. No one could have imagined the extent to which a traumatized and possibly mentally unstable child would be adopted by the McGod family. In telling Gwen about her difficult life and the imminent lack of payments and housing, Janice had absolutely counted on an invitation to stay at her friend's house. She was used to playing on sympathy, was ready to pay for cleaning and looking after Lewis. But the girl hardly expected that the McGod family would go so far as to adopt it. Opened up numerous childhood traumas. All her time in the McGod family had been spent observing the normal lives of other children, longing for such a life feeling. her own inferiority, abandonment, and carefully constructed psychological defense mechanisms. She was used to surviving and knew well how to do it. And suddenly she had it all, everything she'd ever dreamed of, having never seen enough care and love from her relatives. She didn't know how to accept such care and didn't understand how one could feel well-being in her new family. It became difficult for her to accept kindness as something natural. She was constantly looking for a catch. She experienced the usual fear for the future, but did not find it reflected in reality. The care and love her adopted daughter received was filtered through her own experiences and emotional wounds instead of reassurance. Janice felt tension. She didn't know how to be a daughter, but she knew how to be a hired worker with the allotted amount of tasks. She explained to herself what was happening. What this house really wanted was a free worker, not a daughter. Everyone was just playing noble, and reaving in their charity tension began to turn into hatred and a desire for revenge, for being treated like a picked-up stray dog. The better the family treated Janice, the more resentment grew in her heart. In her heart of hearts, she felt like a stranger and was jealous of LVLL and Gwen. The more love LVLL showed her daughters, the more jealousy Janice felt, unable to deal with such emotions. Love and care turned into a source of fear and hatred she experienced, rage and frustration. Feeling even more inferior and misunderstood, this distorted perception became a breeding ground for a desire for revenge against those who she felt had simply taken advantage of her trust. Numerous studies of child psychology emphasize the importance of psychological support for children who have experienced difficult periods and emotional trauma, especially in the adoption process. But unfortunately, no one guessed about Janice's past and the emotional traumas she had experienced. The desire to help the orphaned girl turned into a nightmare for the McGod family. Ruthless and irreparable, Gwen and Lise were buried in a private cemetery on December 20, 2021. More than 1,000 people attended the funeral and all expressed their grief. Janice and Merlin were tried separately, but the young men received identical sentences, 32 years in prison, without the possibility of parole. When they get out of prison, they will be in their 50s, and still have a whole life ahead of them. That Gwen Louise Cruz and LVLL will now not have a horrific crime has shattered the McGod family for forever. Their act of kindness has been rewarded in the most horrific way imaginable. After surviving the horror, it's very difficult to remain kind and strong. But Cruz and LLLA succeeded in August 2022. The couple opened a restaurant in honor of their fallen children that serves their favorite dishes. The couple are undergoing psychotherapy and plan to use their business to keep the memory of Gwen and Louie alive. Thanks for watching. Guys, subscribe to the channel and also don't forget to click the bell. There are many shocking stories ahead.